This podcast is sponsored by A. Miller George Funeral Home, where each life is celebrated, and their sister company, Cremation London and Middlesex, both family-owned and operated. By Hyde Park Care Pharmacy. Experience the difference an independent pharmacy can make for you and your loved ones. Hyde Park Care Pharmacy offers personalized care, short wait time, very competitive pricing, easy transfer of your prescription, and much more. And by Molly Maid. During these times of COVID-19, it has never been more important to keep your family safe. With the Healthy Home Cleaning System, Molly Maid London is here to help. Make your home a healthy haven. Call Molly Maid London today. This week, we welcome best-selling author, editor of America Magazine, and chaplain to The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, Father James Martin. His new book, Learning to Pray, is a helpful guide for all who struggle with prayer. We discuss the new book, his older writings, LGBTQ rights, the faith witness of Stephen Colbert and President Joe Biden, and so much more.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever and whenever you may be listening. We welcome you back to another edition of the Vicar's Crossing podcast. The Vicar's Crossing is a virtual space where faith intersects with the public square. And we are back with another great episode today, episode 8 of our 4th season. And you're back with the Vicars and Iain, and I'm Vicar number 1. My name is Rob Henderson, and I'm the priest at Holy Trinity St. Stephen's Anglican Church in London.
This is very true what he just told you. He is Rob Henderson. He is over there. The truth also is that I'm Vicar 2, Vicar number 2, Thing 2. I'm Kevin George. I'm at St. Aidan's Anglican Church in Northwest London, and really happy to be with you today.
And my name is Iain. I'm a singer-songwriter, the producer behind this podcast, and now the unofficial cat in the hat of this here Vicar's Crossing podcast.
He is the cat in the hat.
Oh yeah.
And boy, guys, what can you say about season 4? So far this year?
It's going. It's great.
This is a mega season.
It's incredible.
One.
That last episode, guys, with Brian McLaren.
Huh? Oh, that was wonderful. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But the hits keep coming.
Great. I know the hits keep on coming, and they do today, because today we're welcoming best-selling author, LGBTQ activist, editor of America Magazine, Father James Martin. Will be joining us shortly, and he's got a new book out, which Kevin and I got.
These are a couple of old ones here.
Those are the older ones. Yeah, we just got them. I got the e-version, so I don't have anything to hold up other than my phone, maybe. But he's got a new book called Learning to Pray, which is an excellent foray into prayer, but not in maybe a regular way you'd expect a book about prayer to be. So we're going to talk to Father Jim about that coming up in just a bit.
Well, that's fantastic. Yeah. Well, before we do any of that, we should really take a moment and acknowledge the lands upon which we are situated. We like to do a land acknowledgement here each episode now, and acknowledge that we've reconciling work yet to do. So we would like to acknowledge the Vicar's Crossing podcast is recorded on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Lenawapak and Attawandaron peoples, on the lands connected with the London Township and Sombra treaties of 1796, and a dish with one spoon covenant wampum. This land continues to be home to diverse Indigenous peoples, to First Nation, Métis, Inuit, whom we consider contemporary stewards of this land. And we see them as vital contributors to our society. And we continue to pray and work for the day when all wrongs will be righted.
Good. Thank you, Kevin. And we want to also send a big thank you out to our sponsors today, as always, on the Vicar's Crossing. First to A. Miller George Funeral Home, where each life is celebrated, and their sister company, Cremation London Middlesex, both family owned and operated. And our thanks and a big shout out to Dave Mullen and his staff at A. Miller George today.
Love you, Dave. I'm doing my shout out today to Hyde Park Care Pharmacy, locally owned, locally operated, locally loved. All your pharmaceutical needs, your Band-Aids, your drugs, everything that you need to get, you can get. It's all local. It's not big box. And you got this incredible person named Carol Basada. She actually calls to follow up with you. Like if you're switching meds or something, just to check in a week later, you're on those new meds. Is everything okay? You don't always get that at Costco. I'm just saying. So check out your local pharmacy.
And last but certainly not least, We want to say a very special thank you to Molly Maid. Make your home a healthy haven. Call Molly Maid London today. They come in and just absolutely spotless. They clean your house. They clean your house.
Cat. Clean your cat too.
Oh yeah, just make it smell wonderful. It's just fantastic. Such a great feeling. Many thanks to Trisha Lister for that one. Big huge thanks.
Perfect. And the best part is you don't have to do it.
That's absolutely
right. They do it.
Yeah,
which is good.
Trisha, she's a parishioner here. She's a great person. She tells me she's got great people working for her. So all your cleaning needs, folks. Healthy Haven.
Perfect. All right. Well, guys, I hope you're well. We've changed our color code again in London, where we're broadcasting from. We moved from red to orange.
Who knows what these things mean anymore? Can anybody tell me what the colors mean anymore?
Well, orange is a combination of yellow and red, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
We learned this in primary school.
So there's some stuff we couldn't do in red that we can kind of do in yellow, so we call it orange.
Why is there gray? Like gray to me suggests
that's
we don't know
marriage and kids, Kevin.
No, I just don't understand. Like, if you want to communicate like total shutdown, it sounds like that should be red. Gray to me sounds like, well, we're not really sure what we're doing right now.
We're kind of
Haven't like picked out a color.
I don't know. So a little bit of change there. I know.
Go back to church, Robbie.
Yeah, some places of worship are going to be having in-person worship again on a kind of a minimal scale, but we are this Sunday gathering. So it's been since when did we leave? Middle of December, I guess it was, right?
Yeah, something like that.
So we'll be back for a bit there. We'll see how that goes, and but most important is looking forward to seeing a few faces. And
that's right.
And that. So I know you're going to be another week.
We're going to wait another week. Won't do this Sunday. We'll do the following one, and if everything is still trending in the same direction. But again, who really knows? We'll sort of follow it as it goes. But I don't know about you, Rob, but I have mixed feelings. Like I'm excited because I want to see people and all that. But I'm nervous. Like I have this nervous energy about I'm not really sure how it's all going to go.
Because we opened up already one time before and then shut down again. So
shut down again.
It's bound to happen before or not. Who knows?
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm looking forward to seeing some folks and being able to chit chat from 6 feet away, even just to say hi and look them in the eye. Yeah. But but it is a little nerve wracking, and we don't want to have to go through another shutdown. I think shutdown again. That to me was hard the second time, and to go through it a third time takes a toll, right?
It's demoralizing.
But that said, we will be living in the moment, and we will be enjoying that day together because it's been given to us, and that's how we're going to kind of look at it.
Absolutely. Well, I guess we'll do a shout out to our Bishop Todd Townsend too for the work he's doing and his crew downtown to continue to roll with the changes as they roll out of Queen's Park and to do what they can to let us be ready and help us be safe. So many thanks, Todd, for everything you're doing.
Good. All right, guys, time to play another round of the new favorite game show here on the Vickers Crossing, which we like to call
It's Not a Lie. If you believe it.
I love this game. I love this game.
It's time again, Kevin. That's part of the week. It's not a lie. If you believe it is a game that the three of us play where one of us tells a bit of a story. Yeah. And it's up to the other two to figure out whether they're lying. But then again, if they are lying and they believe it, is it really a lie?
Is it really a lie?
Oh, yeah.
One of the deep, great mysteries of the world.
Yes,
thinker. My name is George. I'm unemployed, and I live with my parents.
That was the opposite. Yeah,
that was the opposite, George.
Yeah, that's right. So I think Ian's up for a story.
It's definitely my turn, and here's one that comes from before COVID. Are you ready for this?
Okay, pre-COVID. Okay.
So as you know, I am I'm a fanatic for things that are very tasty. I love my food, as I think we all here do. And I was out for dinner one time, and had a bite of an eggplant and spent the rest of the day in the bathroom releasing it, let's put it that way. So if you believe it or if it's a lie, I found out very quickly that I am allergic.
You're allergic to eggplant? Okay, yes. So where did you eat this eggplant?
It was at what is it? It's a restaurant on Wonderland. It's like
Okay, well, let's
like,
just agree not to go there. Okay, we
Yeah.
won't
Yeah,
shame
we're
them
not
on
eating their
there.
eggplant.
yeah.
But
I'm
we
not going
won't
to say
either.
where.
Okay,
I'm
so
not going to say
we're not
where.
going to go there
Yeah. Mhm.
because it gave Iain the runs.
Uh,
So he says.
the mouth runs. Put it that way.
Oh,
He
you
was
were
vomiting.
puking.
Oh,
Yeah.
See,
okay.
everything with me runs right out my ass. So I assume.
Is that counting your preaching?
Oh yes.
Sorry.
Help me
I'm so
burn.
sorry. I'm so
Help
sorry.
me burn. Don't be sorry. All right, I'm gonna go with this is a pile of bunkum, as my dad would say. This is bunkum. You are not allergic to eggplant.
I see. Rob?
Well, that's a tough one. I've never heard of you puking after eating before. So, but that doesn't necessarily mean eggplant didn't hit you hard. And so I think that's very feasible that a
You
young
think it's
man who
true?
perhaps wanted to try something new and wanted to pound down some eggplant,
You know,
Pound
new taste.
pound down a little
exploring.
eggplant after a pizza, might do that. So I'm going to say it's a true story, Iain. I don't think you're lying. I think you're telling the truth.
Oh, well, it's not a lie if you believe it, but it is in fact a lie.
Oh,
Yeah. I don't know if I've ever had eggplant, to be honest.
See, now you just made it up
See,
then.
Yeah.
we just
Okay,
made
Well,
it
so-
if
up.
you believe it, it's not a
Well,
lie.
you believe it, so it's not a lie.
Yeah,
I
keep
just
telling
gotta
that
say,
story.
For me, eggplant. For some people, eggplant is a food. For others, it's a color. For me, it's a shape. Shaped like an eggplant.
Right. Well, at first I thought eggplant. I was thinking eggplant parmesan, which is
Oh,
closest probably I've ever been to eggplant, but
fancy.
not something I'd order on the side. Like, would you like fries or eggplant, sir? All right. Well, that's another. Iain stumped me, and Kevin got it right, so that's good. And that's another segment of "It's Not a Lie," if you believe it.
All right.
What I believe is that Father Jim is ready to join us, guys.
And we do not want to lie to Father Jim.
No more lying. Moving
Okay,
forward.
so boys, we're going to be on our best behavior.
Absolutely.
Maybe. Okay, let's bring him in.
And we are thrilled to welcome Father James Martin to the Vickers Crossing podcast. He's in the Zoom room with us. Hello, Father Jim. How are you? Good to have you with us today.
Good to be with you guys. Thanks for inviting me.
Very
You're
exciting.
welcome. Great.
Yeah,
Whereabouts are you now?
I am in beautiful New York City in my Jesuit community, America
Okay.
House Jesuit community.
Very good. Good. We hope you're keeping safe and with everything that's been going on in this kind of madness over this last year or so.
Yeah,
Hope
we're
you guys
trying. I
are
live
well.
with a community of about 14 people, so it's been
Mhm.
something of a challenge.
I
Yeah,
bet.
yeah, I'll bet.
Yeah.
I'll bet. Well, we're
Yeah.
thrilled to have you here.
Thanks.
I want to talk about your new book and some other things as well over these next few minutes together. So I'm going to hand it over to Kevin, and we'll get right into things.
Yeah, so I just finished reading Learning to Pray, a guide for everyone. What an incredibly well-written and helpful book. I don't know about you, Rob, but my thought was, as a priest, I feel like I've landed on an invaluable resource for people, because I can't tell you how often people say to us, well, you know this as well, Jim, that people say, well, I don't know where to begin. I don't know
Yeah.
where to start. I don't know where to get going. And I think your book is best summed up in these words here. I'll just play this.
Oh, you are so big.
This is how
So
Jim Martin says you should pray.
absolutely huge. Gosh, we're all really impressed down here, I can tell you.
I quote that in the book.
You do,
Oh,
which is
that's-
why
that's-
I played it.
That's the that's your tradition too, right? Isn't
That's
that the
right.
Anglican,
Yeah.
the
Oh,
Anglican
Lord.
cleric?
That's how we roll.
God help
That's
us
right.
all. It
That's
is
how
the
you pray
truth.
every day. It's a
Yeah.
great. It's from. Is it The Meaning of Life?
The
right?
Meaning of Life, yeah. Monty
And it
Python.
just to set it up, it's Michael Palin
yes.
playing an Anglican
Oh, so-
clergyman.
at
in
like
front of
a
a group of
parochial
kids.
school.
Oh, it
this
is just, it is. I use it as an example of somewhat too elevated language.
Oh,
Oh,
it's so
God,
good.
you are
That's
so big.
And it begins with a scripture reading which says, and then they placed the tent pegs and the bits. But it's just too funny.
And also,
Anyway.
it ends that scene ends with a hymn,
Yes.
And the hymn begins, "Oh God, please don't burn us."
Don't burn us.
That's right. Yeah.
I'd play more, but I think it's 15 seconds. I think it's 15 seconds that
The
that
fair
we
use.
end up with the fair use stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, right.
all right, let me get back to the question. So I just thought, because I saw that in your book and I laughed. I actually
I'm
really
so
laughed
glad.
out loud. How often it is that we do get that question, and that sort of comment, oh, I wish I knew where to start. And I think your book is a really good resource for that. It opens up that conversation. Early in the book, you describe discovering prayer on your own journey. And I'm sure many will be surprised with this very public, Jesuit figure in America, very well-known guy, seen on a lot of different media. And they would be surprised to think of you becoming an adult before you really became sort of more engrossed in prayer in a more intentional way. But as you point out in the book, you were not alone in finding prayer to be foreign. You write, for millions of people, prayer is a regular part of life, as natural as breathing. They do it every day, sometimes several times a day. But for just as many people, prayer is foreign, daunting, even frightening. Many people then just don't pray. I'm not talking about, you write, agnostics or atheists. They don't pray for obvious reasons. They either doubt or don't believe in God's existence. I'm talking about believers who don't pray. Now, this is the thing that we find in parochial life as we work in parishes, is people who are quite engaged in a day-to-day life. And they say, well, I don't pray, or I don't know how to pray. You outline very well 10 reasons why people often don't pray. Can you share a little bit about some of those reasons? And I'm certain those who listen and struggle with prayer would identify.
I think the most important reason is that they've tried it and they feel like it didn't work.
Right.
Or nothing happened. That's the most common reason. These are good. I mean, I'm sure in your parishes and in your, your pastoral life, you meet people, very devout people, devout Christians, very active in their parish. And, they want to put Jesus's words into action in their lives. And they hear about prayer and retreats and, when God feels near in prayer, and they hear the priest talking about pray, you must have a life of prayer. And then they sit down and they close their eyes and nothing happens.
Yeah.
And they don't know, they don't want to do.
Right.
And so that's the main reason I think people don't pray. They're not taught what does happen. And that's one of the main sort of foci or focuses of the book. And they feel like if nothing happens, or if it's boring, or if it's dry, then they're a failure. And I think, as I said in the book, some people think that there's kind of an aptitude for prayer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you might be an artist, or a baseball player, or a football player, or, singer, right? There's a perfect example. Like, I don't have a great voice, and so therefore I'm not meant for it. And they give up, or they've had people tell them that the way that they're praying is wrong, or they feel, they want to be closer to God, but they don't know how to get there. They don't even know the techniques. But I think it's mainly because they try it. And I know probably hundreds of people like this, and they don't know what to do. And they sit down and they close their eyes and they wait for the big magic moment that's supposed to come. It never comes. And they say, I guess I'm not good at prayer, and the heck with it. So why waste time? Right. Or nothing, quote unquote, happens. So therefore they feel unproductive.
Right.
And I'm sure you run across people like that. So what I wanted to do in the book is, and I'm glad we're talking about it as, fellow pastors, really in a good way, demystify it for people and say, like, this is what happens. This is what you can expect. And this is how you can do it.
And there are many ways to do it, right? And that, sometimes people are praying. That's not the language they use for it. But in their day-to-day walk, they find themselves constantly in conversation or dialogue with their creator, but they don't necessarily talk about it in those terms. You agree?
Right. And one of the words I like to use particularly is from a Jesuit who died about 5 or 6 years ago, a good friend of mine named Bob Gilroy, who was an art therapist. And he said, I love this. This was an insight he had. And I just love the word. He said, people have these experiences, as you're saying, and not only experiences of praying, but kind of God communicating with them in many ways, but they're not encouraged to talk about it.
Right.
They're not encouraged to talk about it. And no one sort of draws it out of them and say, hey, did you ever think that what just happened might be God? Yeah. And so they have these experiences, but there's no one to help them to kind of understand it in the light of the spiritual life. And because everybody has these experiences. So I love that they're not encouraged or invited to talk about it. And that's what the book is trying to do.
Well, it's a fantastic tool.
Thanks.
For that. Thank you. On the flip side of that, you also write about why people do pray and why it's important to pray. You posit that we pray because God desires it, because we want to be in relationship with God. because we have to, because we are in need, because prayer helps us and it helps us be unburdened, because we want to praise God. We pray as an act of solidarity, and we pray to be transformed. All of this, as I read it, I found incredibly on point.
Thanks.
You quote Walter Burghardt, renowned theologian, preacher, advocate for social justice, who said, "Prayer is a long, loving look at the real." Now, that really hit me between the eyes, I have to say. I want to consider this for a moment in light of a personal story, and I want to couple that with some of your writing in the chapter, Everyone Needs Help, if you'll bear with me for just a moment.
Sure.
So sometimes the real, being confronted with the real or having a loving look at the real is devastating. It can be, life has a way of gripping us sometimes with the unexpected and very painful. So this is a picture of, for those who are on YouTube watching, this is Andrea and Becky. These are sweet little great nieces of ours, myself and my wife, Catherine Ann. Andrea and Becky had Batten's disease. And actually the 28th of February was World Batten's Disease Day. It's a very rare genetic condition. And up until age 3, they were perfectly okay. And then they began having seizures, and eventually they regressed to the point of being blind and tube fed, morphine, oxygen at home. 2 little girls in 2 little beds, or 2 little lazy boys being cared for 24/7.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it was a difficult journey, and it was from the ages of 4 till their 7th year, and they both died in their 7th year.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Thank you. And this is going back now, but we continue to carry them with us, and we carried their story with us because they had an incredible impact on us. One of the interesting parts of that whole journey for us, and I do come from the family that they come from, or faithful family, is this notion, and this is, you write about this in your book, because there were a ton of people praying for Andrea and Becky. Right, of course. And there were a ton of people praying for us as a family, praying for my nephew and his wife, Annette, who were parents to these beautiful girls, and for their older daughter, Leah. They were praying, of course. And there were also people who would come and say to us, if you just go to this magical place, they'll be healed. And, people brought all kinds of magical things that would that would bring healing. And all of those were devout. And it all reminded me, of course, and you write about this, Matthew chapter 7, where we read, "Ask and it will be given to you, search and you will find, knock and the door will be opened for you. For everyone who asks receives, and everyone who searches finds, and for everyone who knocks, the door will be open." How do we deal with those moments in our lives where our prayers go, quote unquote, unanswered? We had people explain for us through those 2 deaths and those 2 visitations and those 2 burials that God needed another angel, that it was all a part of God's plan. One day we'll understand it all. You write about that. You say such explanations fail in the face of the reality of the situation. They also make God, in this case, not only a trickster, you have to figure out what good has come from the child's illness, but also a sadist. God is using the illness to give you or your child something better. So overall, you write, that approach fails. I must say, when I read that, it was healing for my heart.
Oh, I'm glad.
Because we have our own thoughts, and I'll share those after I hear from you about how God was present to us and all of that. But I just know that for so many who would come and say the most insensitive things, devout people, can you say more about how we deal with these unanswered prayers and that sort of a reality in these very difficult situations?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for sharing that story. It's very beautiful and sad and moving. A couple of things. The first thing is it's the mystery of suffering. And as you point out in the book, I use the example of a child's illness because I think that is, for many people, that is, as you know, the most difficult of questions. You can even talk about, people talk about murders and things like that. There's the sense of there's at least some agency in it, right? There's individuals who are doing it, but a sick child, right? Or even a natural disaster. That's the other thing that people struggle with. Just there is this sense of complete innocence and guiltlessness. And so why does it happen? In the book, I go through all the things that people say And in the end, the answer is that we don't understand it. We do not understand it. And all those explanations fail, right? In the face of something like those two beautiful children. And I think it's important I wanted to put that chapter in the book because I think it's important to address that unanswered prayers. And people say, well, your prayers were answered, but in a different way. Well, actually, no, they weren't. I mean, your prayers in a sense may have been answered with something else, but you didn't get what you prayed for. You prayed for them to be healed and live. And, sadly and tragically, they did not. I mean, everyone has experiences like that in their life. And I wanted to be really clear about not sugarcoating it, Right. And so I think the answer is we don't know. Right. But the invitation is to still trust and believe in a God that we don't understand. Now, I think for the Christian, there is, of course, Christ who participated in this suffering and who, when we pray to Jesus, we're praying to someone who understands our suffering because he's human. I mean, who knows if he didn't know children like that, who knows? I mean, back in first century Galilee and Judea, right?
Right.
So he's with us in our suffering. Now that doesn't solve the suffering, but I think it gives it a perspective. But the one thing, it's interesting, Kevin, the one thing I wanted to say, which I've actually moved to a different point of view about this. The kinds of things that people say, especially like as if God needs another angel. How many angels does God have, right? It also makes God out to be greedy. Yes. I need another angel. Yeah. I think there's a couple things going on. One, I think, as you probably know, people don't know what to say.
That's exactly.
And they're trying, and I actually take these things as they're doing their best. They're doing their best. And second, they don't know how to understand it themselves. And so this is how they rationalize it, But the problem is imposing that on somebody else, Like, for example, I might think about some suffering that I'm going through, that it is, I might think that it is part of some plan that God has. Like, I don't know. I mean, maybe the particular suffering that I'm going through at the moment is in some mysterious way part of God's plan. I would never say that to somebody else,
right?
Because it kind of cuts off any sort of willingness of the other person to hear you where you are,
right?
And it does. What kind of a plan is that?
Yeah.
So in other words, I think it works on multiple levels. You have the person who's, I think, trying to be helpful in some way. You have a person who doesn't understand, but also you have a person who in a sense also doesn't want to hear your confusion, because it's a kind of challenge to him or her. So sometimes I feel, when people say that, I feel pity. Yeah. But the other strange thing for me is this, and I have to admit this, my belief, I believe that, after we die, we're with God, right? And certainly two children. Yeah. I've had, this is very personal. I've had something that I've had to deal with myself, which is that I do believe, right, that after like what were their names again?
Andrea and Becky.
Yeah, like after I do believe that this is what I'm saying, that after Andrea and Becky died, they went straight to heaven. I believe that, and they are praying for you. I mean, I believe that, right?
Yes.
I believe.
Yeah.
What I find myself having to do these days is actually not say that to people, right, even though I believe it,
right,
unless they're very devout,
right,
and unless it's someone like a 100-year-old woman, I say, now she's praying for you. So it's also, so I in a sense can sympathize with people who say those things, because I believe that these two beautiful children are in heaven praying for you and your wife and your whole family. Yeah. But I also have to be careful not to impose that on people, because it can short circuit things. And also, it can also come off at the moment as really callous.
So thank you for that. So the other interesting part of that for me is, because I agree. I think I used to say at the time, you find yourself, I'm sure you've been there, you become the family chaplain, right? You're the priest, and you're going to have to do this sort of negotiation between people. And so part of it was trying to walk them through people trying to be, they're trying to be helpful, right? People are, but sometimes I think, with prayer, people are afraid of the silence, right? You write about that too. Like sometimes just showing up and being quiet and being adjacent to somebody. You talk about being in solidarity, like just showing up, and you don't need to say a lot, there's nothing to be said because of the mystery of it all.
Yeah. And I also think, to your point, one of the reasons that people don't pray is because of precisely experiences like you're describing, which they have asked for something and they don't get it. And they either feel, they feel one of two things: either what's the point, because it didn't quote unquote work, or I'm mad at God.
Yes.
So why would I want to be in a relationship with this God? So yeah. And I think the idea that you would want to be in a relationship with a God you don't understand, who is mystery and who is sometimes silence. And we can talk about that more, what that means, but it's daunting to people, and who can blame them? And certainly, hey, if you're someone who's struggling with prayer and some priest says to you it's part of God's plan, you would say, well, what do I want to be part of that plan for?
I quit on that God, let me tell you.
I don't want to be part of that. It's like an idol that needs to be smashed.
So for us, just to tie a bow on this and go to Rob, but my godfather is grandparent to these girls, my brother-in-law, and Gary said, that as our prayer life goes, we found ourselves going from praying for a miracle to praying for a peaceful death.
Sure.
There was a healing in all this. It wasn't easy, and it was mystery, and it was painful, and none of it was clean. It was all messy. But we did get to see God in the middle of it. We saw it in the funeral director who poured himself out for us, and the owners there who helped out, and parishioners in a parish that I was in 3,000 kilometers away who pulled together $10,000 to help. There were things that people did through all of that where God's love was abundantly present. That's what we got to see it.
Yeah. And that's what I try to encourage people to see, like, where was God present? And there's a big difference between, as you know, sort of helping people spiritually in inviting them when the time is right, obviously. Tell me where you experience God. And all those things you said are ways that God has of working through different people and in the situation. But the place you don't go is, well, God, made that happen in order that you would experience all these things. And the person would say, well, you know what? I'd rather have my children back instead of a nice, funeral director.
Exactly.
So it's very nuanced. And I think poor pastoring is also one reason that people turn away from prayer, because they're turning away from God. Because who wants a God like that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So picking up that kind of theme of where is God present, and being able to discern and hear, one of the chapters of your book, Learning to Pray, Jim, that I really enjoyed a lot and that helped me a lot was the whole chapter you did on discerning God's voice, because I'm one that, the mind's always going, right? From the moment I wake up, the moment I fall asleep. And over the years, I've learned and had to practice ways to be quiet, so that those competing voices don't take my attention all day long. But setting aside time for prayer, meditation, even taking a walk helps a lot. But even in those intentional times, sometimes it's difficult to know if what you're hearing or feeling is a holy voice, as opposed to perhaps the voice coming from the world, or the voice of ego, or the voice of a parent from years ago who keeps pounding in the back of your head. And you're right, in this chapter, which I really liked, you said, there is a difference between daydreaming and intuiting God's voice, between a random coincidence and God's activity, between God's voice and our voice. Yes, sometimes these things overlap and it's hard to distinguish between them. But God's communication is always mediated through our consciousness. And this means that if we don't grasp some essential differences, then we run the risk of thinking that everything that pops into our head is God's voice, when that is assuredly not the case. And what I loved about the chapter is you highlighted some of the essential differences so that there can be some discernment there. I'm wondering perhaps if you could share one or two with us, because they're really helpful to me.
Yeah. And thanks for bringing that up. It's funny, I'm smiling because I struggled with whether or not I should write that chapter, because I hadn't really seen anything like it. I wanted to be blunt, and it's based on spiritual direction. How do we know? And some people say, well, you can never know. And it's all, no, I mean, there are some things that you can know that is either this is probably God. We can't know for sure, but this is probably God and this is probably not God. And so I think that the easiest one is, does it lead to an increase in love and charity, right? And faith. And so for the example I always use is, which people laugh at, but I think it's accurate. If you're praying about what to do with some person who's a problem in your life, let's say for some of our listeners, like a boss or a manager or something, or even like a family member, and you're taking one of your walks, Rob, and you have this impulse, and you're praying, you're kind of constantly asking God, and you just suddenly have this impulse, oh, I just want to punch that person in the face. Right. And it comes during your prayer. It comes during your prayer. Now, if you weren't someone who was discerning, you might think, oh, well, I was praying and it came up. God wants me to punch that person in the face. So you would say, oh, okay, I'm going to go punch them. And it's kind of silly, but it does point out that, that does not lead to an increase in love and charity. By the same token, if you're walking on the street and suddenly you get this insight into this person who you are upset with or who is upset with you, and you start to sort of pity them, you have this sense of compassion for them, and you, gosh, they're really leading a hard life. And you say, I wonder if, a lot of this anger at me is coming out of whatever they're going through. And you just have this kind of sense of sort of peace and letting go. Now, I would say that's probably more likely coming from God. So that's one way to discern. I also think, oftentimes it feels like it comes from outside of us, right? It's kind of, it's a new, I've never had that insight before. There's that. It makes sense. Like it makes sense. It fits with what we know about God. That's another thing. So, we'd say God would want you to sort of be compassionate. That makes sense. And we also know that God doesn't want us to punch people in the face.
Punch the bishop in the head.
They'll punch the bishop in the head, right? Which would not be a good idea. Also, some of these things that happen are kind of, they're lasting. They have an impact. It's not just some fleeting thought. So I lay out some of these, guidelines, I would say, not rules in the book, because we know everything is mediated through our consciousness, right? I mean, unless we're going to have some vision of God. And so you do need to discern that, because not as I think I put this in the book, it's also about things that happen to us kind of in nature. Not every leaf that falls in front of you is a sign from God. However, some things that move you through nature may be ways that God has of communicating to us. So it's a lot about discernment, and eventually you get to know God's voice. And I would say this, Rob, I think that most believers do have a sense of what God is going to sound like. And they know enough about God or Jesus to know, I think that's probably from God. I usually say to people, trust yourself, as the old Dr. Spock from the baby books used to say, more than you think you do.
Yeah, exactly. I've often kind of used the phrase, if you get kind of that holy pause where all of a sudden everything looks different for a second, and it's pointing toward grace, love, these types of things, then there's something there, right? That's great.
I wish I'd used that in the book, the holy pause.
Hey, it's all yours for the next one.
Well, it's funny because someone said one of the last sort of guidelines I have in there is from a recent spiritual director who said, which I really like, that it's lasting. Like it's something you remember like weeks after, months, and you say, that makes sense. It would have that quality of, almost the eternal. It would make sense to you forever. So I think the thing is, people tend to dismiss stuff more than they accept it.
Right.
If you ask them, is this from God? They say, but a lot of times it just, that just came into my head. Can I share a story with you I didn't put in the book?
Of course.
Please.
Yeah, absolutely.
A friend of mine, I will keep this vague. A friend was on a retreat, not in Canada, not anywhere near where you guys are. And this person who I know was was sort of dragged to the retreat, which is kind of funny. Like, this is the first time that this person had done a retreat. And she was walking a labyrinth. I'm sure a lot of our readers know what they are. They're popular retreat houses. And she thought, well, this is kind of dumb. Because it's, labyrinth, when you look at it, it's just this pattern on the ground. And it's not like a maze. It's not like you're in even like a maze, or you're just walking on there. You can see where it goes. And it does seem kind of silly. And so she thought, well, I'll do this. Right. And she walked very contemplatively. You're supposed to do it very slowly. And she got to the middle, and she said to me, and I felt this great sense of calm and of peace. And she said, now, what do you think that was? Now, see, that's the moment for the person, because without encouragement, to say, wow, what do you think it was? Or that could have been God. And you are in a retreat after all. And without encouragement, the person would just say, whatever. I was just, whatever. I was just in a better mood. And then they move on. Right. And so it is encouraging people to see where God, and not just in their prayer life, but in their daily lives, where God is active like that. And that's why I put special emphasis on the book on what actually happens during prayer, like what happens when you close your eyes. So to help people understand those experiences.
Yeah, that's why I love that, because it was practical, and
Thanks.
and reading, as I read those, there were things that I could stop after each one you highlighted and say, yeah, I can see that. I can see that.
Thanks.
So,
well, I get tired of prayer books and spirituality books that are vague.
Yeah.
And, it's funny. I'm sure you've read them all or many of them. And it's like, and then when you feel God's presence or God's gentle touch, and people say, what are you talking about?
Am I having a love affair? Like, what's going on?
Right. Well, and actually, it's funny, Kevin, like people do use that language.
Yeah.
Like when I feel God's love, and this is authentic, but the problem is for people that don't pray, they don't know what are you talking about?
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
Yes, right.
Yeah. So I wanted to be blunt.
Yeah. Well, you did a good job.
Thanks. Drives me because that language as a Jesuit novice used to drive me insane.
Right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. The other ones I wanted to point out for everybody, and really want to suggest to get the book to read these because they're so good. The 7 Ds of the spiritual life. I wrote them down as I'm reading: darkness, dryness, desolation, doubt, disbelief, despair, depression. Yep. Been there.
Yep.
But but I was thinking that dryness is probably one of the most common objections to prayer. You mentioned kind of that off the top when we were talking, and I've said it myself. Nothing's happening, and it's understandable because we live in kind of this give and take culture, right? If I'm going to give myself to God, I'm going to give my heart and my soul and everything, and I'm going to expect something back.
Right? Where's the payoff?
Yes,
right. Exactly. And you're right that this is the potent reminder, though, of an essential truth of our spiritual life, which is that you are not in charge. And I think that's so important.
That's devastating.
Yeah.
There it is. No, but you're right. We're very productive. We want to, it's all about producing. And so if I sit down for half an hour and I don't quote unquote get anything from it, and not even in terms of what Kevin was talking about in terms of answered prayers, but like I don't get a feeling or I don't get all the things we talk about, emotions, memories, desires, then what's the point? Right. And again, to one of the images I use in the book is comparing it to a relationship. It would be like saying, if every moment of my married life or even friendship isn't this sort of, bells and whistles, what's the point? And I'm glad you're laughing because it's crazy, but like any relationship, it has to go through some dry times.
Right. And often the dryness is happening in the moment, and we expect everything yesterday. In our culture, but often that dryness you can see perhaps what it was later on. That it actually wasn't a dry time, that there were workings going on. I'm wondering, do you share so many great personal stories in the book, but is there a dryness episode in your life that you look at and go, boy, nothing was going on, but maybe later I can see where that
I think most of my prayer life is dry. I mean, I think it's more waiting for the rich moments that happen, right? And I think it's okay to just be in God's presence, right? A lot of my prayers just simply placing myself in the presence of God. And I think a lot of it is also imagining myself in, say, the gospel reading for the day. But a lot of times not a whole lot happens, and that's okay. And I think part of the thing with sort of counseling people in spiritual direction is to say to people, that's okay. I mean, imagine like a newlywed couple coming to you and saying, a lot of times there's not much going on between us and I don't feel a whole lot going on. And you would say, that's okay. And that would make the person feel, oh, okay, I'm not doing something wrong. Or, conversely, as some people say, God's not mad at you. That's what a lot of people think. God's punishing me with dryness.
Dryness, exactly. I want to throw it to Iain for his next question, but Ian's a singer-songwriter, and I know that in your art, Iain, you've talked about this, that there are moments of dryness when you're trying to come up with lyrics or music and that sort of thing too, right? Like you certainly identify with that.
Absolutely. And it's really like kind of shocking how similar that I'm sort of now finding out how similar songwriting and prayer is in a way. It's like a form of meditation. Sometimes it's just like, oh, here you go, right there in your arms, and it's done, and you write it down, and it just happens. And then other times you're sitting, and just hours go by, and you're just there's nothing. It's like you could hear the tumbleweeds just passing through. Yeah.
Well, and they're both gifts, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, and that's, I mean, literally inspiration is the spirit being placed in you. And I truly believe that. I mean, I think someone who's an artist like yourself, it is inspired. And you can't, I mean, as you know, I'm not a songwriter or a singer or anything, but you can't force it.
Yeah.
No.
And you can't manufacture inspiration and prayer either. And it can be, I'm sure I would imagine it's, even though you know that, Iain, it's probably still a little frustrating,
Yeah, for sure. Because sometimes, just to get off topic just a little bit, sometimes, and people can tell when a song seems very manufactured without that inspiration. And that's why people like a lot of music. There's that inspiration and that feeling that they can relate to, even if they can't point it out. It's what your favorite song is can say a lot about you, because it shows that you have that inspiration sort of sense in a way.
I think a homily is like that too.
I
think people can tell when there's there's a spark, and it's just kind of by the book.
Sometimes you can write one in like 20 minutes. It just comes out. And other days you start on Tuesday and it's Saturday night and you got nothing.
I know. As a friend of mine likes to say about his homilies, the priest who starts his homily, as I was walking across the parking lot this morning.
That's right. As I was putting on my chasuble this morning.
As I was putting on my chasuble 5 seconds ago. It suddenly dawned on me.
I have to preach.
The one that I always object to was as I was praying about this reading this week, I was like, dude, if you have to tell us you're praying about it, I mean, I think we hope that you are doing that already.
No dust protest too much.
Right.
Iain, shift gears for us, buddy.
We're going to shift gears just a little bit. I wanted to shift gears and talk about your advocacy for the LGBTQ plus community. Currently, a little backstory here, on Capitol Hill, the Equality Act, legislation that would add sexual orientation and gender identity to protect status under the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which was narrowly passed in the House, is facing an uphill battle in the Senate. Last month, when congressional Democrats introduced the act, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops quickly opposed the measure. The U.S. CCB committees denounced the proposed bill, claiming that, quote, rather than offering meaningful protections for individuals, it would impose sweeping regulations to the detriment of society as a whole. Now, you have been a vocal supporter of LGBTQ plus rights, which is fantastic. In your book, Building a Bridge, How the Catholic Church and the LGBT Community Can Enter into a Relationship of Respect, Compassion, and Sensitivity, you write, in my years of counseling and speaking with LGBT men and women, I have heard countless stories of cruel and heartless comments made by priests in homilies or in private conversations that betray the most hateful attributes towards LGBT people. Over and over, I would hear the same question: how can I stay in a church that treats me like this? Are the bishops once again engaging in these cruel and heartless comments? Is there a place for LGBTQ plus people in the church?
We really did shift gears, didn't we?
Yeah, just a big,
slightly.
Iain was like, "We're having too much fun."
Okay, that's okay. I would say this. I'm not going to critique the USCCB, but I would say that
smart. By the way, smart. That's very smart.
I would say that that the church has to find ways to put into effect what the Catechism says, which is we're supposed to stand against unjust discrimination. And I think that, certainly discriminating in terms of employment and, housing, those kinds of things is truly unjust. And I think that the invitation for the church is to, be clear about its ideals and its teachings, but also stand up for these people, because the times when they do that, bishops in general are really few and far between. And I found that, over the years that it's hard for a bishop even to say the word LGBTQ, Right. Now, the second question is much easier to answer, which is there a place for LGBTQ people in the Catholic Church? Absolutely. Because why is that? They're already in the church.
That's right.
I mean, they're baptized, right? So they are Catholic. And in a sense, it's like saying, should the sun shine every day? Well, the sun does shine. Well, maybe not shine, but the sun's there every day.
Yeah.
And they're already there, and they are as much a part of the church as their priest, their local bishop, Pope Francis, or me. And I think one of the, I know you're not asking it this way, Iain, but one of the difficulties with, people who frame it that way is it is as if we are saying that we have to they have to become Catholic. They already are Catholic,
Right.
but it's really hard. I think that in a sense, the focus on this topic among some of the bishops really does make LGBT people feel targeted, and that they are the only group that is in any way at odds with the church. And I often say, imagine the bishops decided that they would be against, and when they are, obviously, Catholic teaching is against premarital sex. Mm-hmm. And that they would look at, the high number of college students that are engaging in sexual activity, or high school students for that matter, as far as I know, but I know it's mainly, the college students, that's sort of provable. Mm-hmm. Imagine if every other day was about something about how terrible and sinful college students are. People would say, wow, what's going on? And yet that's more or less what, a lot of the bishops do with LGBTQ people. It's this kind of relentless focus on them as the only or chief sinner in the Catholic Church, whereas we're all sinners, Yeah. So where's the concomitant focus on college kids, or people who are using birth control, or people who are divorced, or for that matter, people who don't give to the poor, or people who don't care for the environment, or people who don't forgive their neighbors, or people who don't go to Sunday Mass. I mean, that's a sin as well. So I think it's the thing that saddens me is it is discriminatory in a sense to consistently single out these people. And and you're right. A lot of people, as I say in the book, they feel unwelcome. Right. And so one of the things I'm trying to do in my own way and with many, many other people is to make them feel welcome, and to remind them, and to remind people in the church that they're part of the church too.
Right. And you've been doing that. It comes with some heat.
Oh, yeah, it does. It comes with a lot of heat. But, I was praying about that this morning, actually. And speaking of prayer, and I had an image in my mind of Jesus. We all have to I'm not Jesus. We all have to pattern ourselves in Jesus. Right. Going through the streets of Jerusalem, and, he's getting it too. And so why should we be any different?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, why should we really? I mean, Dorothy Day used to say,
That's
they
true.
did it to the master. Why wouldn't they do it to the servant?
That's exactly true. I saw the piece that you shared about the Martin Sheen piece, actually. And we had actually we have a little segment on here from George Costanza called "It's Not a Lie If You Believe It." And I told a story about meeting Martin Sheen, and to see if these two would believe that I met him. I did meet him because he came in and received an award at Assumption University at the University of Windsor, which is Basilian. And Dorothy Day had received that award as well, and so he agreed to come. And I mean, I that piece that you posted to me was another example of those, and that one was specifically about war. But it again, see what happens when the faithful, whoever they are, priest, lay, ordained, whatever, but when the faithful are prepared to speak up and take action, for those who are on the margins, and that's where the sense of, but it's costly, right? Martin Sheen's testimony to that.
Yeah, it is. And it's almost daily for me.
Yes. I know. I watch Twitter, and it's like, man, how do you like?
It's crazy.
They really like to kick the hell out of you.
Well, and I'll tell you, if I can share the experience in prayer, maybe I can share this as a way of talking about Ignatian contemplation, which is placing yourself in the scene. It's one of the techniques I talk about in the book. The key experience for me in prayer happened about, I'm terrible with time, 7 or 8 years ago. I always thought if I was on being on a trial, and the lawyer would say, when did this happen? I'll be like, I don't know, 10, ago. 15,
everything's a few years ago, especially in COVID time. It's like, when did it happen?
Like sometime last year. So I was on a retreat about, say, 7 or 8 years ago. And there was a guy in my community. I just wrote about this in the tablet. There was a guy in my community, no community that's around anymore, who really detested me. And I mean, detested me. And, look, c'est la vie, right? Religious life is just like any other community. And it was really difficult for me. And so I went on retreat. I'll keep the story short. And my retreat director said, why don't you pray over the story of the rejection at Nazareth? As we know, this is when Jesus stands up and they kick him out of the synagogue at Nazareth, and they drive him to the brow of the hill and they try to kill him. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was praying about that. And, as you know, you've probably heard a million homilies where it's all about, oh, well, how often do we too miss what's in front of us? I mean, you've probably preached homilies like that. And I have too,
sure.
because the townspeople couldn't see that, God is so ordinary and familiar, and in our lives too, blah, blah, blah. Well, on that retreat, I remember seeing it from Jesus's point of view. Like, look, Nazareth is small.
Right.
How were you able to get up and say that? And the words that came to me in prayer, which I didn't hear them, but I kind of intuited them, and they came into my mind, were, must everyone like you?
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, to your point, Rob, like, whoa, like, where did that come from? You know what I mean? Like that holy pause.
Yeah.
And I thought, where's that? What's that mean? And so I unpacked it, and I started to think it was a kind of an invitation from the need to be liked, loved, or approved of. And that related to this fellow in my house. But then a couple of years later, all this pushback came for the book. And I thought, wow, I think that's what that was about. I mean, I think God isn't usually that like you have this experience in prayer that means this. But in that experience, I thought, yeah, it's an invitation to be free of the need to be loved, liked, or approved of, because Jesus was. I mean, if he wanted everyone in Nazareth to approve of him, he would have never left.
That's true. Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's kind of how I deal with it. I go back to that. Look, not everybody can like you. And a lot of people hate me now. I mean, they really, if you go on my Facebook page,
social media
you're a heretic. You disgust me. You move on and you shake the dust off your feet, and then you ban them from your Facebook page.
Well, yeah, that's another good idea. But
because they don't get to stay.
I will say that the other thing that happens is there are those of us who've been largely shaped by your witness, and we pray for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I mean, like, it's important for me to say to you that,
well, thanks.
I see that stuff and I just double down, right? It's like, man, come on. And,
you pray for me, but hopefully you don't pray against those other people.
I don't know. No, I don't. But I think of it. I think of punching him in the head.
I'll tell you a quick story. I put this in the book. There was a Jesuit who told me this true story, not apocryphal, about walking in on his mother. And his mother had a rosary in her hand, and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry." And she said, "This is a true story. Right, yeah. I'm praying against your cousin Timmy."
That's right.
And the Jesuit said, "What?" And she said, "Timmy was supposed to come over and move a piece of furniture or something, or pick this up, and he didn't. So I'm praying a rosary against him." And the Jesuit said to his mother, "You can't pray a rosary against somebody." And the mother says, "You want to bet?" So I tell people not to pray that way.
Listen, just to shift gears a little bit. Your books, I mean, incredible. Like, I got Jesus here. Well, I mean, Jesus is here, but this is a heavy one here. And we've got
wow, thank you, Jesuit Guide.
Yeah, that's great.
We also have, but I couldn't put my hand on it before I started, Between Heaven and Mirth.
Oh, thanks.
One of the things I really like about you is your sense of humor. You really have a great sense of humor.
Thanks.
And the subtitle of that book is Why Joy, Humor, and Laughter are at the Heart of Spiritual Life. In it, you write, joy, humor, and laughter should be part of everyone's spiritual life. They are gifts from God, and they help us enjoy creation. Now, your great sense of humor, my introduction to you actually was on the Colbert Report. Stephen Colbert, and you have a great relationship with Stephen. So, by the way, let us know when he wants to come on the podcast. We'll make room.
Well, you know, many people also, I mean, they ask that obviously, but also the other thing is, a lot of people ask, like, probably shouldn't say this, but like honorary degrees and,
really?
He's pretty selective.
Oh yeah, you know? Well, I bet he is.
He must get.
Well, he has to get.
Yeah.
But if he ever says, "I'd like to go on a podcast," I'll turn him right over.
I am kidding, because he's got better things to do. Not that you
don't.
Not that you don't, by the way.
That's right. He's a busy guy.
He's a busy. Not like you. I mean, what are you doing?
Right.
You got nothing to do. You're just hanging out with a bunch of fools in Canada. That's all good. Okay. So you were chaplain to Colbert Nation, which is, famous as
now I am the chaplain of the Late Show. He named me chaplain. Late Show.
I saw that. I watched you just a couple of weeks ago.
It's like really bringing in the money too.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. Yeah, Stephen's a very intelligent,
he is
faithful Catholic.
and a nice guy.
and an incredibly, I mean, I just love the man. I really
He
do.
is. He's a very nice guy.
He doesn't hide his faith.
Mm-mm.
He talks about it quite openly.
Mm-hmm.
He's also been through incredible heartache in his life.
Mm-hmm.
And in that same book, Between Heaven and Mirth, you write, finding joy in times of pain begins with understanding that true joy is rooted in God.
Mm-hmm.
Thus, keeping one's relationship with God at the center of one's life is essential to discovering areas of joy, comfort, and solace. When I read that section of the book, actually, Stephen Colbert came to mind, because that's how I got introduced to you. Because I've studied him since I've gotten to watch him and know him a bit, and I know of his story and the pain, the heartache in his own family. Perhaps I'm off, but would you say his joy and humor come from a deep and sometimes painful place? And is Colbert in his own right an important voice of faith in our time?
Oh, the second part of the question is easy to answer. Absolutely. I mean, he's one of those public Catholics out there.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, he's not only a public Catholic in that people know he's Catholic. He talks about his faith and his Catholicism. I think it does come from a place of pain. I mean, the thing you're referring to is he lost his, hope I get this straight, his father and his brother, was it, in a plane crash, I think.
Yeah.
I may be wrong, but I think it was father and brother. And it was, devastating for him. And he tells the story of going to the funeral and someone making a joke in the car and it relieving things, and him saying, gosh, I wish I want to do that, and I think he, so he's had in many ways a tragic life, but also in many ways a, very joyful life.
That's right.
I would say I think his humor comes from, I mean, obviously his intellect, but I think it's more of his faith, less than the pain, because he's very, he's focused on God, and he used to call the Colbert Report the joy factory.
Yeah, that's right.
I really because he wanted to kind of create joy. And it's funny. It's funny talking to him about the faith kind of off camera without like breaking confidence. He's really engaged, and he really has a thirst for kind of understanding the theology, and he really is nobody's fool. He's really a very smart guy.
I love when they're in studio and they've got God up in the dome talking. It's just very funny.
That's great.
He's a lot of fun.
Before we let you go, Jim, with one more question, a bit of a change in the White House over the last couple of months, new administration and such. And I know your new president, Joe Biden, an incredibly faithful Roman Catholic, second Roman Catholic president in history. Just wanted to get your take on how you're experiencing the change in tone at the White House that you've seen over the last couple of months, and what are your hopes for this new administration moving forward?
Oh, gee. Well, not to get too political, I would say I am hopeful, right? I mean, I think, I don't agree with them on everything, right? I mean, I'm pro-life for one thing, but I think that on many things we agree, refugees and migrants, the poor. I think the tone is just much better, right? I don't think he's demonizing people. I don't think he's demonizing anyone, frankly. I don't think he's, using, how do I say this politely? I think he seems to have a better sense of sort of public service than, the former president did. I'm very hopeful. I think what's interesting about him as a Catholic is that people are going to be seeing, and they've already seen,
that's right,
a lot more Catholic culture. So I think people knew, of course, he's Catholic. So, kind of ticking all the boxes. What does that mean? Well, he believes this, and this, and he's a Christian. He's this, he's that.
And
he knows the Pope. He goes to mass. But I think people, I certainly didn't. And, even more than John Kennedy, who had to kind of downplay his Catholicism, right? Because you remember famously he had to go through in front of the Protestant pastors and say, I'm not controlled by the Vatican.
Yeah.
Biden, he talks about sisters he knew. He talks about On Eagle's Wings, the song he likes. He quotes, of all people, St. Augustine in his inaugural address, which I have to say, I was watching with my Jesuit brothers and all of our eyebrows went up. I was like, Augustine. So there's a lot more Catholic culture, I think, that people are going to be seeing in the next 4 years. I think the other thing is, I've never met him. I know a lot of friends of his. I think, as I said, I disagree with him on some things, but he seems like a very nice person. He seems like a really down to earth, generous, thoughtful person. And, I think the tone is a lot better. I found the last 4 years of kind of demonization of people and, particularly like refugees and migrants, which is a cause close to my heart, as animals. And one of the things that really ate at me, and I'm not sure why, probably because it was just so sort of wantonly cruel, like needlessly cruel, was the name calling.
Right.
Pocahontas and
terrible.
Just that is
terrible.
so. I was kind of stunned, and I still am. And I don't think, I'm sure Joe Biden has his sinful side, as we all do, but
Malarkey.
I have a hard time. Well, that's malarkey. I have a hard time imagining him doing that.
It was a very meaningful act of remembrance at the White House. Just we could go with the 500,000th death of COVID, just that type of tone.
Well, and the sad thing was, you know what's amazing, Rob? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's okay.
What's amazing is that is such a surprise for people.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that should have been done. Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
That's
the thing.
Well, the thing is, we feel like we've been joking about this the last few weeks because we had Lenny Duncan on here a few weeks ago. I don't know if you've come across Lenny or not. He's a Lutheran pastor, and Lenny asked us, what does it feel like to live above a meth lab? So we've been joking that we feel like the really strange neighbor has moved out, and this really sort of stable, church going, really nice, regular Joe has moved in next door. It's like, and it's like, oh, we like this. I'm no longer peering through the blinds waiting for the police to show up.
Well, and all. That's quite I'm in the middle of watching Breaking Bad for the first time, so that's a kind of very potent image. I think there was an article, God knows where I saw it, or it was on something like boring is better.
Yes.
And so I think that one of the difficulties and the kind of, I would say, truly exhausting experiences was waking up every day and seeing some story about, Donald Trump making fun of someone or denying some basic truth, or denigrating some group of people or losing his temper. And it was exhausting. Yeah. And so I think the boring, again, you might disagree with him on certain topics, and I do. The boring kind of plotting, going through the motions of government, I think is a relief for people.
That's right.
For most people, let's say.
That's true,
half the country doesn't agree with me.
6.5 out of 10 anyway.
That's good. Hey, Father James Martin's our guest today. The new book is Learning to Pray. I wanted to highly recommend, especially to our clergy colleagues who are listening. This is a wonderful book to read for yourselves, and I think something to bring into the parish. Very helpful and moving and transformative too. So, Jim, thank you so much. We really appreciate that you would take the time to chat with us three goofballs up here in Canada, and we love you, even though you might have a few haters. We love you up here. We're praying for you, and we wish you all the best moving forward. And God bless you.
Thank you. I'm really grateful, and I'm really grateful, especially for the prayer. So, thanks very much.
You're welcome. Thanks so much.
Yeah, that was great. So again, thanks to Father James Martin, and really do recommend that book, everybody. Learning to Pray. It's out now, just came out a little while ago, and got to have it in your library. Okay. So guys, that was another great one for the Vicar's Crossing. Good to see you. And thank you again to our sponsors, to A. Miller George Funeral Home, where each life is celebrated, and their sister company, Cremation London Middlesex, both family owned and operated, to Hyde Park Care Pharmacy, locally owned, locally operated, locally loved, and to Molly Maid. Make your home a healthy haven. Call Molly Maid London today. And we'll be back again next week with another edition of the Vicar's Crossing. Until then, I'm Rob Henderson from Holy Trinity St. Stephen's.
Kevin George from St. Aidan's Church.
And my name is Iain.
And Kevin, remember to always look both ways
before you cross the street.
Thank you for listening. Our hosts are Kevin George and Rob Henderson. Our producer and composer is myself, Iain, with original artwork done by Elizabeth Dodman. If you have any questions or want to know where to find us, tweet us at Vicar's Crossing or find us on Facebook at The Vicar's Crossing. If you have any other questions about anything heard on this podcast, leave us a comment or look in the description to find out more. Thanks!